The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
A pleasant good night to you and welcome to another edition of The People's Business. I'm your host, Shane Seeley, and tonight our topic is water security, the BWA's response. And we have some senior members from the Barbados Water Authority to address just that. How do we make sure that our water coming through your taps is secure, safe, and the best quality that can be provided to you, their valued customers at the Barbados Water Authority. So I want to welcome tonight Stevon Roberts. He's the chairman of the BWA. Along with him is Chris Mapp. He is the acting general manager and director of finance there. And also we have Charles Leslie, the director of engineering. He has been very busy recently dealing with a number of issues across the country. So we have a lot to talk about. Stick around. We'll be back in a few moments to talk about water security and the BWA's response. So let's get into it here on the People's Business as we talk about water security and how the Barbados Water Authority is doing just that, is responding to ensure that the water that we get is the best quality there is. Barbados, according to statistics, still has some of the best water in the world, but how much of it do we have? We know that Barbados has also been designated a water scarce country, one of I think it's in the top 10. But we have the experts here to talk about that and a whole lot more. Of course, we know what happened recently in terms of some outages that we would have seen across St. John and then some issues up St. Lucie. So there's a lot to talk about as we look to see what is happening with the Barbados Water Authority and how they're getting around managing the business of our water. So let me welcome back the chairman, Stevon Roberts. We have Chris Mapp as well, as I said, the acting GM, and Charles Leslie, the director of engineering. Chair, I want to start with you to put this conversation in perspective. And it comes at a critical time too. We're in the hurricane season. It's a time we expect to get a lot more rain, but things are not always the way they seem. It doesn't always work like that, that you get rain and then we get lots of water. Talk to us about this water security and what are we doing at the Barbados Water Authority to ensure that we get the job done?
Well, Shane, first of all, I know the public would have seen us purchase quite a few vehicles recently, and that is to help with the work that the plenty work that we have to do around the island in terms of the water infrastructure. We experience about 1,500 burst spikes a month, and previously we only had 1 or 2 plumbing trucks that were working at any one time. So now we are about to roll out all of our new equipment and be able to apply the services that the public needs to get the bursts and stuff fixed in a timely fashion. So that's one of the main things that we are focusing on now, is in terms of service to customers and getting the repairs done timely to stop the water wastage.
Indeed, we had a situation there which we were all watching to see what would happen, and it was sorted out in less than 24 hours. I'm talking about the recent outage in St. John. Charles, I want to bring you in here to talk about that, to talk about what happened and how your team went about addressing that situation.
Okay, good evening, Shane. Thank you for having the Barbados Water Authority here tonight. Recently, we had some issues in St. John, and before that, we had some issues in the Casa Grande area. The St. John system is basically supplied with water out of our Bowmanston pumping station. And there are two components to that. Bowmanston supplies water by gravity. The gravity feeds all the way down through Draxall, Greens, Ellerton, as far down as Flat Rock. While the pumping out of the pumping station that was supplying primarily the customers in the vicinity of the St. John, the parish of St. John. And recently we had two issues, and they combined to create what we call the perfect storm. We had an issue with one of our pumps, one of our well pumps started to malfunction, so that related or translated in not enough water being produced at the facility. And coupled with that, we had leakage from that gravity system. So those two things combined to create what we consider to be the perfect storm. So the customers then who were being fed out of the pumping, those were the ones that really experienced the outage. And we were able, as you correctly said, to do some emergency work and to quickly correct that within a period of 24 hours. We were able to replace that pump, so we had to stop the station completely and do an emergency replacement. And we were also able to address the leakage out of that distribution system. Prior to that, we had some issues in the Casa Grande system as well. Our water system on the island is aged. A lot of this water system would have been installed from as far back as the 1800s. And during the 60s and the 70s, all we did was basically expanded the water system to deal with the emerging demands of the population, because as the population spread across the island and the districts grew, we extended the system, but not a lot of replacement work was done. And as a consequence of that, we are now seeing the effects of the age system deteriorating and causing things like frequent bursts, discolored water issues, and so forth. So in that Casa Grande area, even though we were putting in more and more water, what we were seeing is that bursts were developing on some of the major lines, and that contributed to outages. And the media would have been following us as we went about finding some of those leaks and repairing them. I'm pleased to say that today we have corrected those leaks, and the customers within the Casa Grande system are experiencing a better service than they were back then.
That was a long process. I mean, outside of that recent situation, getting the St. John system right, that was an uphill battle, and it's one which took a lot of resources, and that's why I want to go to Chris now to talk about that, the resources that the Barbados Water Authority has been spending on the network and spending to get situations like St. John right, and of course a lot more work will be happening up north as well. Talk about the numbers, give me some numbers, talk about the money that you are seeing being spent on mains replacement, on extending network, renewing certain elements in the network as well.
Okay, as Charles would have said, as it relates to mains replacement, it typically takes just about $1 million to replace each kilometer of mains. And the network within Barbados is just over 2,500 kilometers. So it is very costly, and where the attention has been directed is in those areas where the infrastructure is breaking most. So where those leaks are frequently occurring, etc., within the distribution system. With Vineyard would have also been completed recently. The cost to date on Vineyard would have been just about $20 million or so, and that would have helped us to get money into the system, as Charles would have said. And we are looking also at spending money on desalination plants in the north. Those are also upwards of $10 million. So the money has largely been funded by the government of Barbados. The BWA facilitates expenditure on our operating costs. So our salaries and wages, the same vehicles that the chairman would have spoken about, etc. We are able to manage those operating expenditure. But when it comes to the capital expenditure, the BWA still has to largely rely on the government of Barbados for those large capital costs.
And when you talk about the operating costs, the money that you are using to deal with the day-to-day business of the Barbados Water Authority, this is what comes from the customers, correct?
This is what comes from the customers. And since 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, we have seen a 170% increase in the level of our receivables. That is just our water receivable and also our GSC receivable. So at the start of the pandemic, we would have had receivables of just about $10 million. Right now, that has grown to about $28 million that we hope to collect from customers. And also, since the start of the pandemic, the BWA has not been disconnecting customers. There would have been an initial freeze on disconnections by all the utility companies. The BWA is still not disconnecting customers, but we are trying to look at a process where we look at it as a last resort after we have exhausted all measures. So we still try to reach out to our customers to impress upon them the need to come in and service their debt, to come in and make a payment plan with the authority if they're having difficulty paying their bills. But obviously we see disconnection as a last resort, but the other side of it is within the GSC component, which is also growing. Part of that, which is the garbage contribution, is also used to fund the activities of the Sanitation Service Authority. So it doesn't only affect the operations of the Barbados Water Authority, but also the Sanitation Service Authority when customers don't pay their bills.
Chair, you've been in community, Stevon, you've been in community talking to a number of these customers to just get their feedback about what they think about the water supply, if they're receiving it. I know you would have visited some of those troubled areas initially in St. Joseph and St. John. Talk about that. Talk about the feedback. What have you been hearing from them? What are some of their main concerns? Give your take on the situation when you hear what they have to say.
Thanks for that question. Let me say that Barbadians, first of all, always say to me, they don't mind us delivering water by the tankers. They love to feel the water coming, falling on them from their taps. So that is what we intend to do, get water coming from everyone's taps throughout the whole of Barbados. So on a weekend basis, the general manager and myself will visit all the areas where customers were having problems to find out what their grievances were. And St. Joseph, for many years, was one of these major areas. I am proud to say today, based on the hard work of my team at the BWA and the Vineyard Project, that St. Joseph is now experiencing about 10% of those problems that they were experiencing before. I actually get a message every single morning from one of the residents of St. Joseph thanking the BWA for their service. So we are seeing much progress in the work that we are doing, but we still have a lot to do. And we're just asking the public to bear with us, and I will continue to go on weekends and meet with our customers who are experiencing problems to continue to see what we can do to make life much easier for them and to give them a better service where water is concerned.
Work in progress, because the mains replacement as it goes, you replace a main today, yes. Down the road it still has to be replaced years on, and the lifespan for these mains has been shortened. One time you could leave a main in the ground probably for 60 or 70 years. That is no longer the case or the standard. And I'm figuring, Stevon, that to-do list is long, and I know that the man executing that to-do list, a lot of it is Charles. What are some of the things that are top priority now for the Barbados Water Authority on its to-do list? Charles.
Well, go on, Charles.
Okay, Charles, you go ahead.
Okay, in terms of water security, there are four main areas that come to mind you have to look at the availability of freshwater resources for the population. We also have to look at the existing and emerging demands. For instance, we're pushing for increased tourism, increased agriculture. Um, Obviously, once we do that, we also have to keep breast with those demands. We have to look at our current challenges, and we also have to look at the physical security of our facilities, ensuring that basically those fences at the facilities are adequate, the lighting is adequate. So our to-do list comprise of the repairs to the system, and that would be in terms of ensuring that the reservoirs are rehabilitated or replaced as need be. The mains are replaced as with international standards. For instance, in Barbados, we have approximately, for the first 5 months of this year, approximately 87 burst mains per month. Last year we would have had 99, and it would have peaked during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, at 141. That is not normal for a well-functioning utility, and that is primarily due to the lack of investment in terms of replacement. For well-functioning utilities, if you check like across North America, we would recognize that you are supposed to be replacing at least 1.5% of that network annually. And we have not been doing that. But as Christopher, the acting general manager, has indicated, we need to focus more on that replacement. We have done in 2014, I think we started with 46 kilometers. That was the first major replacement that we had on record. And since then, we've been doing the CB funded mains replacement, which addressed a lot of the issues in the St. John area. And I think we did 26 kilometers. And now we are going to do a further 26 kilometers, and this will be funded by a Latin American Development Bank called CAF in the Casa Grande area. Our primary focus was initially to get water into the area because the funding was limited, and now we're going to be focusing on the replacement of mains within that distribution system. Additionally, as was mentioned before, we are also going to be looking at investments in desalination. All of our existing water, whether it's brackish water at Spring Garden or water from St. Philip, is in some way related or linked to rainfall. But as the predictions suggest, rainfall is going to be reduced, and when it does come, it's going to be coming in short and intense periods, and we don't know basically how we are going to be dealing with that. So we are looking at further desalination. We're looking at seawater desalination to augment those resources. So those are some of the things that we have on our plate basically over the next couple of years.
And then we'll talk a bit more about that as we get into this show, as we look at water security and how the Barbados Water Authority is responding. Remember, callers, the number is to call tonight, 228-5562, 228-5563, with your questions for our panel. We'll take a break and we'll be back to talk a bit more about water security and the BWA's response.
We're trying to cut down on the amount of outages that we are experiencing. Sometimes it's not always the fault of the BWA because, as you know, our stations work on electrical pumps, and sometimes we have some power surges that affect us tremendously. And that is kind of hard to explain to a customer because the customer doesn't see that part of it. The customer is just seeing that their water is off. So that's one of the things that we are actually going to improve on, where we're going to implement backup generators at all of our plants that hopefully will stop this problem. Charles will probably be able to explain a little bit more about that situation. And in terms of the bursts around the island, I think water waste, the BWA can't be the biggest waster of water. So when our pipes are burst, we need to be able to repair them in quick succession. So what we've actually worked on, as you can see, is increasing the vehicles, which I have to, at this time, thank the government of Barbados for coming on board with the Barbados Water Authority and giving us the necessary support that we need to get the equipment we need to do the work for the people of Barbados. So those are my three major areas where the Barbados Water Authority is concerned.
Chris, I want to come to you to ask you about your level of satisfaction with the performance over the last couple of years by the Barbados Water Authority in terms of the numbers and dealing with that, but also in terms of its service and looking at that same customer service, as you're so closely connected with those in the customer service department as well. But we do have another caller on the line before I come to you, Chris. Good night, caller. Welcome to the People's Business. What's your question?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to the People's Business. You have a question for us?
I have some complaints which I would like the general manager to address. That is, since 2006, 2007, I've complained to the former general manager about the discoloration of water in the Mount Poya Harris's area. And it is so bad that you can't cook with it, you can't wash with it, you can't drink it. And I've always been told that because we are at the end of the line, that is why we are getting this discoloration of water. Now, I've been hearing of the broadcast about the swabbing and what's not. Now, I want to know if that is really going to address the problem of discoloration of water, seeing that I've been told since 2006 that because I'm at the end of the line, that's why we keep getting that discoloration of water. Now, up to this evening, I took a video of the water to send on to one of the health inspectors. I don't know if he received it as yet, but the water is deplorable. What I would like to suggest, or ask the general manager, is if he can allow me to, let's say, $40, my water bill comes around $84. If I can pay $40 of that water bill and the other $40, the usual thing for me is to buy bottled water, and it's very expensive. I have to buy bottled water at least, a case of bottled water at least twice a month. So I want to know if he can address.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the BWA has actually looked into offering rebates to customers, both in areas where water is scarce and also in areas where water is discolored. So we've put together a paper, and that paper has gone to our board and been approved by our board. And we are obviously cognizant of the needs of our customers. We know there are issues in certain areas. We are looking at that rebate, and we hope that we can roll that out to customers soon. That rebate we can only offer on the water portion of the bill. It's not something we can offer on the GSC portion, because the GSC is really a contribution levy. That's a flat $45 on the domestic bill. So that rebate will be strictly on the water portion of the bill. The GSC portion will still have to be paid, but the rebate is something that we are looking into.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that explanation there. I'm pretty sure that customers would want to take advantage of that where there's a situation that there's a problem with either the scarcity, outages, or as the customer there said just now, he has some discoloration of the water, and he did mention that he knows about the swabbing exercise that was being conducted up north. Charles, you care to tell us about the success of that exercise?
Okay. In the north of the island, we have a really bad problem of discolored water. That problem is related to a number of things, and um, we, we, we indicated that we had to tackle it from a number of different angles. We looked at our well at Allendale, and we did some maintenance on that. We are also doing some swabbing. We're swabbing the large mains, the transmission mains. And we started with the main going from Half Acre to Lamberts. We would have done that. That was the first one. Then we did from Allendale, the Cart Road by Allendale or Burrows, all the way down to an area called Judge Gap. This is just after 6 months. And the last area that we would have completed on Friday was going across Checker Hall. The idea is to clean the larger mains, to remove any sediment or so from those larger mains, and then when you get to the smaller mains, then we will have to do what we call flushing to remove any sediment from them. In the north of the island, a vast majority of our mains in that parish are online, which means that they're aged and they don't have the cement lining that would protect them from getting corrosion. So what happens when the water gets into contact with the metal, you get rusting, and then you get the discolored water, as the customer was saying. In the Harris's Mount Poyer area, I believe that they have a 3-inch main feeding down that area. And to address that, we would have to replace that 3-inch. The swabbing would clean the larger mains, but when we get to those smaller mains, there is nothing really that we can do in terms of rehabilitation of those smaller mains. So normally what we have to do with those smaller mains is to do a replacement to improve the quality on those smaller mains. So that is something that we'll be doing in the north as well. We have identified approximately 30 kilometers of main to replace right across the parish. Mm-hmm. And in this year's budget, we're looking at, I believe it's 7 kilometers of main to replace in this year's budget. Subsequently, replacements would follow after that.
Okay, so doing that maths, and I know Chris will help me with that when we come back from the break, $37 million that the Barbados Water Authority will be spending to replace these mains to clear up the issue of that discolored water, help to clear it up north, along with the work that you're doing with the swabbing. But we'll talk a bit more about that on the other side of this break. Just there, before we went to break on the People's Business, we were talking about addressing some of the issues in the north of the island with discolored water in some parts of that part of the country. It's an issue that you have heard the Barbados Water Authority dealing with through its swabbing exercise and the replacement of mains. I also did that calculation there, Chris. $37 million, 30 plus 7, 37 kilometers of mains to be replaced, 7 kilometers during this financial year. I mean, when you see these numbers, it's really an expensive undertaking to get into the business of dealing with water and the water in terms of those projects on the ground that you have going on. Talk a bit about how you've been managing dealing with some of the expenses there for the Barbados Water Authority and approving these projects.
It is extremely expensive, Shane. The 37 kilometers that Charles would have spoken of, that really equates to the 1.5% of our network that we look to do on an annual basis. And as I stated earlier, we make enough money to service our operating expenditure, not so much our capital expenditure, which we are still heavily reliant on the government of Barbados for that funding. And obviously we know that the government itself is stretched also for funds. So the funds we've allocated this year are for mains replacement for the same desal plants that we've spoken about, but there are also some other pet projects, and these are strategic initiatives that are very important to the BWA, and one of those would be our renewables program in an attempt to decrease our electricity bill and our reliance on the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited. The BWA is the largest consumer of electricity on the island. Our electricity bill is anywhere upwards to about $25 million per year. And with the adjustment to the fuel charges on a monthly basis, our light bill, as you would call it, has gone up by over $1 million per month. Now, when the cost of fuel goes up, the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited, they have a K factor within their bill that they can adjust the cost of fuel and pass that on to the consumer. The Barbados Water Authority does not have such an adjustment in its bill. So however much we pay for fuel and whatever that fuel charge will be, and as I said, it's over $1 million per month more, that is not passed on to the consumer. So the BWA has to absorb that cost. So we look for additional funds for the electricity portion. We look for it on the desal portion also, because desalination and to produce desalination is also then heavily reliant on water. So we are in a position where we are servicing our expenditure, but as the cost of fuel increases, it really does place strain on us. And that is why I impressed earlier upon the needs of customers to settle their water bills and settle them on a timely basis, because the service which we try to deliver to our customers is very much dependent on what we can pay for also. We have bills just like consumers out there have bills.
Chair, this is something that I've heard you preach from time to time, just asking customers to come in and create a plan. And we heard Chris talk about it earlier in the show, about making that payment plan to pay waters a mammoth arrears there that you have at the Barbados Water Authority. Remind us about that amount again. What do the arrears currently stand at?
I think the last time I was here, Shane, the amount was 90 million, and we have gone in excess of 130 million now. I think the last time I spoke to Chris, that's where we were. It's probably a bit more than that now, because I spoke to Chris about a month ago. So we know that some people are still suffering after coming out of the pandemic, but what we want customers to understand, that those who are still having financial issues, they can come in and sit down and have a discussion with my customer service team and my account managers, and they will work out a payment plan that will be affordable by such persons. And those who can actually afford to pay their bill, we are asking you to pay the bill because we really need the funds. Yeah.
We do have some more callers on the line. Let's go back to the phone lines. Good night. Welcome to the People's Business. Caller, what's your question?
Good night.
Good night.
Good night to the panel. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
I'm calling to ask two questions in terms to the pipes and whatnot. At the Water Authority, we're working in collaboration with the Ministry of Health in terms of reducing the water that comes from the normal sewage well, that probably could be affected by metric and use separate tank. That's one. And is there something else that we can use outside of the chlorine that we can use to bring a more clear water to our system? For instance, England is used something near EC. How expensive that is, but in collaboration to the chlorine. Let me do two questions.
Okay, caller, before you go, give us that first question again because I didn't quite understand
The first question is the water works. Normally when you building a house and you draw a plan, I think the water works do get a plan, get a part of it because the ministry have dealing with water. So I'm asking, seeing that we have a lot of water, domestic homes using water wells coming from the tap, from the storage. With the drying, with the lot of low water, rainfalls, and the water seeping down to the bottom of the well, is it a possibility that it can be contaminated with the metric going to the water system?
Thank you, caller, for your questions.
Thank you.
Charles, I'll put that one to you to clear up because I think the caller may be confusing the lines in terms of what runs where. So just help us to understand in terms of that separation between the wastewater and then our running water which comes through our taps. And then you could talk get to the chlorine side of things.
Okay, the island of Barbados has been, since the 1960s, been segregated into a number of different zones. We had from zone 1 to zone 5. Zone 1 basically were those areas that protected the source of water. So around, like, for instance, the Bell pumping station, you had an area demarcated and it's called the Zone 1 area. And this similar thing existed for all of our sources across the island. In those areas, the building basically has been restricted so that no additional development was allowed in those areas. And as you move then from those Zone 1 areas down to the what we call the Zone 5 areas, closer to the wells, then building was allowed, but then you were you can add there were certain levels of protection for the water as well. So like in Zone 2, you had to include a septic tank so that your discharges from the house don't go directly into the source and affect the source. And as you move further to the coast, down to Zone 5, those restrictions were lifted. So then people were able to add wells, sub wells to the property. So the protection has worked well for the island, and we're actually now revising that protection and actually looking to in terms of just protecting against the bacteria and so forth. We're also looking at protecting against chemicals and other compounds that may occur in the water as we are developing. So there is a system of protection of the water, the potable water, and as the customer said, we work with the Ministry of Health to ensure that the water is well protected. Actually, we do testing daily, weekly with the Ministry of Health, annually, and then we do what we call widescreen testing, where annually again, where we do tests for all types of chemicals and compounds that may get into contact with the water. So the protection that we have currently is adequate in terms of the protection of the water. The customer raised a question about chlorine. Chlorine is an agent used to disinfect water. So what the chlorine does, it kills any bacteria or any pathogens that may occur in the water. So we add that chlorine to kill them, and then we also add the chlorine to give you what we call a residual, because as the water leaves the plant and it goes into the distribution system, you still have to have a residual level of chlorine in case it comes into contact with any bacteria in the pipelines. In some other countries, they use other forms of disinfection at the source. So for instance, in like some parts of Europe, they use ultraviolet radiation. That is a form of disinfection as well. But when the water leaves the plant, you still need to have some level of protection. So even though they use other methods of protection at the source, they always use residual chlorine in the lines to protect that water as it's moving through the distribution systems towards the customers.
Okay, Charles, thank you so much for that explanation. We will take another pause here, but when we come back, we'll get some final comments from all of you as we look at water security and how you've been responding. We'll take a break and be right back. We have a few more minutes to spend with you here on The People's Business, and we have some more callers on the line with questions for our panel tonight as we talk about water security and the BWA's response. So let's go back to the phone lines. Good night, caller. Welcome to The People's Business.
Hey, good
What's
night,
your question?
to you on the panel. My question
Yes.
will be saying that the water authority know the problem. My problem will be how long is it going to take to the end of the year, next year, what?
Which problem? What is the problem exactly?
You all identify what is calling the rust. So my problem is how long will it going to take to fix that problem with the pipes by the end of the year, next year, what?
Okay, so Charles, do you have a timeline on that to address the discolored water in the north?
Okay, the problem with discoloration and the addressing of that problem is going to take a number of years. As our general manager indicated, financing is an issue, and we could only address so much in terms of what our capital budget would allow us, and in terms of what we are able to obtain from either the government or lending agencies. Our network, as I indicated at the beginning, is 2,500 kilometers, and we constantly have to do a replacement. What we have found in the past is that we only extended the network. We kept extending the network, but we didn't do replacements. So for any well-functioning utility, you have to be constantly replacing your mains. So the mains replacement in the north, we're looking to address that over a 2 or 3 year period. But in terms of the replacement across the entire island, is going to be we're looking at a continuous replacement of mains annually. Based on the length of network that we have now, which is about 2,500 kilometers, we're looking to have a program that would allow us to be able to replace at least 30 kilometers of that annually. And we believe that once we replace 30 kilometers of mains annually, we'll be continually refreshing our network, and we will obviously be reducing the incidence of discoloration, bursts. We'll be addressing the issues of redundancy, because each time we do mains replacements, we look at the capacity of the existing main and we look at the new demands that are coming on the system. So once we address that mains replacement issue and we have that going continuously, we're addressing some of the problems that we currently have.
Okay, one more quick call for us tonight on the People's Business. Let's go back to the phone line very quickly. Good night, welcome caller to the People's Business. What's your question?
Good night.
Good night.
I just want to know if any swabbing was done in St. James area, let's say Porters or so. That's one. Second, why is it when you contact the water authority with any issue, you write them about something, they are so tardy in any response or they never respond? I just want to know that.
Okay, so first question, any swabbing done in St. James, Charles?
No swabbing has been done in St. James. What we've been doing in St. James in terms of addressing any issues that we have will be flushing. So for instance, if any dead ends that we may have in any of the districts, we will go in and do flushing. Swabbing is a method that goes beyond the flushing. So once the situation reaches a point where the flushing cannot help and the frequency in which we need to go back to flush has increased, then we go to the next stage, which will be the swabbing. Once the swabbing, we reach a point where that cannot help, then we look at the mains replacement. So there are various stages that we go through in terms of addressing any discoloration water issues.
The caller, Chris, also asked about the BWA's response to customers. There is a hotline that customers can now call, which is 434-4BWA or 434. The way I remember is 4344 BWA. Talk about that response and responding to customers in a timely manner. How are you trying to get that done now?
I will take that one, Shane.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
First of all, let me apologize to the customers of Barbados for that tardy response in the past. And one of the reasons for that was that the number of reports that we will get and complaints that we will get and not having the manpower to deal with all of these responses is not for lack of wanting to respond. And we have since then increased the amount of people we have working in customer service. So we are doing much better at one, answering phone calls and responding to written complaints. So I would like the customer to know that going forward, we will definitely improve on that, as we know customer service is very important.
Chris, you wanted to add to that?
If I might just, customer service, as the chairman has spoken about, is something that's very important to the BWA. And we know there are issues, and this year we intend to carry out at least 2 customer surveys. We've already carried out one amongst our customers because we know we need to benchmark ourselves in terms of our performance to our customers. And we are looking to improve our performance. We have taken on, as the chairman said, additional staff to answer the phones. We have an IVR system, computerized system when customers call in, etc. One of the issues that I know customer service is also faced with, outside of the staffing levels that we've spoken about, is when people call in to report things like burst mains, etc. I think we get those typical Bajan descriptions of where a burst main, etc. may be. So that can sometimes slow down the process that it takes to find a leak or a burst and for the BWA to address it. But we were also, as noted, restricted by the number of vehicles that we had and the crews that we had that could respond in a timely basis. But that is something that we're working on and correcting.
Well, I mean, as I say, it's a work in progress, but all you can do is ask people to be patient as the Barbados Water Authority tries to do what it does best, which is provide us with quality water. And as I said earlier in the program, I had a conversation with someone today, and they told me that we still have the best or one of the best qualities of water in the world when you look at the testing done. Charles, we were talking about the testing done earlier, and I know we only have about a minute left in the program. Can we still say that Barbados has one of the best qualities of water in the world?
Yes, we can continue to say that because between the Barbados Water Authority and the Ministry of Health and the Environmental Protection Department, we've come up with a regime as to how we would test the water. So when we develop a new source, we do what we call widescreen testing on that source to ensure that anything that is possible in terms of chemicals or whatever we can pick up. Then periodically, annually, we do that widescreen again. But then on a weekly basis, between the Barbados Water Authority and the Ministry of Health, we do testing at various points across the network.
Yeah.
No two entities test the same point. So there are certain points that we test as control points, but then they're scattered across the testing points, they're scattered across the island to ensure that we cover as much of the network as possible. So if there are any issues, then we could address them as quickly as possible between the various entities. So yes, we can still say that we have good quality water being provided to the public of Barbados.
And I think that's really what all they want, a consistent supply. But as you appeal to them as well, they need to pay their bills so that a number of these new mains can go into the ground. And we really applaud you for the work that you've been doing throughout the years, but especially during these last 2 years of the pandemic. I really want to thank you for coming on the show tonight and answering some customer complaints as they will have, but just their queries about what is happening with the water supply and how you're dealing with water security and responding in that regard. Thank you, gentlemen, for spending some time with me here on The People's Business. And I want to thank you, viewers, for watching another edition here with me. That's our time. Good night. You stay safe. Until next time.